Imagine you're the CEO of a multi-billion-dollar, publicly traded, multinational corporation.
Right. Okay, I'm with you.
And you have just signed what might actually be the most lucrative licensing deal of the decade. Like, you are going to literally print money using one of the most beloved, globally recognized fantasy franchises in human history.
Yeah, the dream scenario.
Exactly. So your stock is immediately soaring. Your investors are, absolutely thrilled. But meanwhile, your own employees are threatening an outright revolt.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and this highly mobilized army of internet users is actively organizing this massive campaign to brand your entire company as morally bankrupt.
Right, which is, it is the ultimate modern corporate paradox, right?
It really is.
You've achieved total financial victory and total public relations warfare in the exact same pen stroke. You're sitting there staring at this pristine, highly profitable spreadsheet on your desk, while outside your window, there is just a raging culture war being fought over the very product you just bought the rights to sell.
Yeah, and that tension, that incredibly volatile space between the cold mathematics of the bottom line and the heated, emotional reality of modern online activism is exactly what we are waiting at.
It's a messy space.
Oh, very messy. But welcome to the deep dive. If you're joining us, you are probably what we affectionately call the learner. See the trending topics, you watch the outrage cycle spin up on social media, you read the sanitized corporate press releases, and you want to know what is actually running the engine beneath the hood.
Yeah, because it's never just the press.
Never. You want to understand the hidden mechanics of pop culture and high finance without getting completely deafened by the noise.
Which honestly is increasingly difficult. Like, the signal-to-noise ratio in modern discourse is astonishingly low.
So low.
Especially when millions of dollars in deeply held personal identities are colliding in real time. To make sense of it, you really have to look past the rhetoric and examine the actual market dynamics at play.
Okay, let's unpack. Today's focus is the incredibly complex intersection of corporate IP management, fan activism, and market economics. We're looking at how massive corporations mathematically calculate their way through highly polarized environments.
Right.
And to do this, we are analyzing a very specific explosive case study based on source material from a recent YouTube broadcast by the channel Clownfish TV.
Yeah, they did a really interesting breakdown.
They did. They dissected some very pointed comments made by Hasbro CEO Chris Cox regarding their newly expanded massive licensing deal with the Harry Potter franchise.
Just a quick note, though, before we dive into the deep end of this pool.
Oh, right. Good call.
Yeah, the source material we're analyzing today from Clownfish TV touches heavily on the ongoing, highly charged cultural debate surrounding the author J.K. Rowling, her public statements, and the intense, broader societal conversations regarding trans rights and gender identity.
Yes, and we need to be incredibly clear up front here. Our job today is not to take a stance on that underlying political and social conflict.
Not at all.
We are putting on our economic heart. Our goal is strictly to impartially report on and analyze the arguments, the business strategies, and the cultural phenomena exactly as they are presented in our source material.
Exactly.
We are here to dissect the anatomy of the controversy and the corporate response to it, not to endorse any specific viewpoint from the activists, the CEO, or the commentators themselves.
Right. We're basically looking at the board, analyzing the pieces, and understanding why the players are making the specific moves they're making.
Perfect way to put it. So let's start by looking at the sheer scale of the move Hasbro, because to understand the explosion on the internet, you first have to understand the magnitude of this business deal.
It's massive.
It is. Hasbro, which is a titan in the global toy industry, and crucially the parent company of Wizards of the Coast, the makers of Magic, The Gathering, and Dungeons & Dragons, they have been named the official global master toy licensee for the Harry Potter franchise.
And the term global master toy licensee is the critical phrase there.
Wait, what does that actually mean in practice?
Well, it means this isn't just a peripheral contract to produce like a handful of niche, limited-run collectibles for a specific market. This is acquiring the keys to the entire.
Oh, wow.
And the source points out that Hasbro is taking this massive contract over from their primary rival. So this represents a seismic shift in the physical supply chain of pop culture.
It's a sweeping rollout, then. The source material details that this covers dolls, role-play action figures, collectibles, interactive plush toys, board games.
Everything.
Yeah, essentially, if it is an object made of plastic, resin or cardboard that carries a Hogwarts logo. Hasbro is going to be the entity manufacturing it, distributing it, and profiting from it on a global scale.
Right, and taking that a step further, the commentators at Clownfish TV immediately highlight the secondary, arguably much more lucrative implication of this deal.
The crossovers.
Exactly. Anyone who follows Hasbro's current corporate strategy knows they no longer view their brands as isolated silos. They are obsessed with integration and cross.
Yeah, they want everything to mash together.
They do. So the source strongly suggests that this master license will inevitably lead to highly integrated Harry Potter crossovers with Hasbro's internal gaming engine, specifically Magic, the Gathering and Dungeons & Dragons.
Which is where the numbers start to get truly dismal. Like, if you look at the tabletop gaming space, Magic, The Gathering has already been aggressively pursuing this strategy with their Universes Beyond product lines.
Right, the third-party stuff.
Yeah, they've brought in massive external IPs, Lord of the Rings, Fallout, Doctor Who, Assassin's Creed, integrating the wizarding world into the mechanical ecosystem of Magic. The Gathering isn't just a fun idea for fans.
No, it is a license to print ungodly amounts of money.
Exactly. But the source material poses a really fascinating analytical question. Why take this massive swing right now, knowing the cultural baggage attached to it?
Well, the Clownfish TV analysis points to a very pragmatic, almost defensive financial reality inside Hasbro right now.
Defense. How so?
According to the source, Hasbro, and specifically the Wizards of the Coast division, desperately needs a monumental financial win to offset the underwhelming performance of other IP integration.
Really?
Yeah, and the commentators specifically single out Star Wars as a franchise that has simply not been delivering the necessary revenue returns to justify its costs recently.
Okay. That is a staggering shift in the cultural life. I mean, for decades, the conventional wisdom in the toy industry was that putting a Star Wars logo on a box was the ultimate, infallible guarantee of profit.
Is the gold standard.
Yeah. But if those toys are suddenly leaving a gaping hole in your quarterly earnings report, you have to find an equally recognizable global juggernaut to fill that void.
Right. And look at the underlying mechanics of the IPs. Star Wars has suffered from immense market saturation and shifting demographics.
Sure.
Conversely, the fantasy genre aligns flawlessly with Hasbro's primary internal engine. Magic, the Gathering, and Dungeons & Dragons are built on a bedrock of swords, sorcery, wizards, and fantastical creatures.
Oh, that makes total sense.
Yeah, integrating Harry Potter doesn't require any mechanical contortion. The aesthetics and the gameplay loops map onto each other perfect. So from a purely strategic, spreadsheet-driven perspective, it is a completely frictionless pairing.
Except the friction isn't in the game mechanics, is it?
No, not at all.
The friction is in the culture. Hasbro executives knew the moment they signed the paperwork that they were stepping into a minefield. The source material highlights that even before this announcement, there were widespread rumors that employees within Wizards of the Coast were adamantly refusing to work on anything related to Harry Potter due to the intense controversy surrounding Rowling.
And that internal pushback represents a massive logistical headache for management. I mean, you have creative teams essentially threatening a soft strike over the morality of an IP that the executive board has already legally committed to producing.
It's wild. So
Yeah.
Hasbro takes this massive gamble, fully aware of the impending backlash. And the moment the ink is dry, the internet does exactly what everyone expects it.
It explodes.
It completely explodes. But instead of deploying a generic PR firm to issue a sanitized non-apology statement, usually, the CEO actually steps up to a microphone. And his defense strategy is fascinating.
Yeah, what's fascinating here is where and how he did it. It occurred on the Decoder podcast hosted by Nilay Patel.
Right.
And to Patel's credit, he did not shy away from the core conflict. He directly confronted CEO Chris Cox with the reality of the backlash.
Yeah, he didn't lob soft.
No. He pointed out that the creator of this IP has very loud politics that actively alienate a significant portion of younger consumers. Patel challenged Cox to explain how a corporation that aggressively markets its own commitment to inclusion can justify partnering with a creator at the epicenter of such a divisive cultural storm.
And Cox did not flint. Like, he stood his ground entirely. Based on the excerpts provided by the source, his defense was this. He said, "For me, it's separating the art from the artist and going to kind of what the core..."
That's a very specific phrase.
Very. He explicitly refused to engage in the political debate itself. He weaponized the word joy, basically stating that Harry Potter is a wonderful franchise that simply brings joy.
Notice the sheer rhetorical architecture of that maneuver.
Okay, break it down.
This is a surgical attempt at corporate compartmentalization. Cox is deploying two very distinct, very calculated shields simultaneously to weather the interview.
Okay, let's pull those shields apart. What's the first one?
The first is the philosophical concept of separating the art from the artist.
Right, a classic defense.
Exactly. By invoking this, Cox is attempting to validate a ruthless financial decision by dressing it up as an objective, almost noble appreciation of the creative product itself.
Like he's just a purist.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He's communicating to the market. We are simply acquiring the rights to manufacture magic wands and print spellbook. We are absolutely not acquiring, endorsing, or funding the author's social media presence. He is building a rhetorical wall between the physical toy and the human being who invented it.
Which allows him to focus relentlessly on the utility of the product. That word joy. The product therefore the product is good. But he still has to address the other side of the equation. He still has to answer the accusation that Hasbro is abandoning its own stated progressive value.
Which is where the second shield comes in. Because immediately after distancing the product from the creator, he pivots directly to internal corporate HR language.
Oh, the internal diversity.
Exactly. He leans heavily into Hasbro's own internal diversity metric. He states how proud they are of the diverse viewpoints and the inclusive culture within their own employee base.
I see the structure now. It's like a two-step misdirect. Step 1, demand that the public separate the external product from its problematic creator. Step 2, demand that the public judge Hasbro's morality solely by looking at their internal hiring practice rather than the external partners.
Spot on. He is attempting to construct an impenetrable firewall between Hasbro's internal corporate culture and its external global supply chain of intellectual property.
Having his cake and eating it too.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah.
He wants the credit for internal diversity without having to pay the financial penalty of limiting his external business partnerships.
But this is where the source material provides a brilliant piece of counter logic. The Clownfish TV broadcast highlights a specific criticism from a social media user named Lauren, and her argument cuts right through that corporate firewall.
Yeah, this was a really sharp observation.
It what? She points out that the concept of separating the art from the artist was originally intended as a personal coping mechanism.
A philosophical tool for the individual consumer, just sitting in their living room.
Exactly. I mean, that is the core of it. It was meant for you or me, trying to reconcile our deep emotional connection to a beautiful piece of music or a profound film after discovering the director or the musician was a deeply flawed, maybe terrible human being.
Yeah, it was an internal private struggle.
It was a private, emotional reconciliation. Lauren's point is that this concept was never designed to be wielded as a get-out-of-jail-free card for the CEO of a multinational corporation who is, to use her incredibly vivid phrasing, driving a dump truck of money up to a bigot's front porch.
That framing really exposes the structural weakness CEOs argue. From a strictly ethical and logical standpoint, Lauren is making a devastating point about the nature of financial tethering.
Yeah, because if a corporation is contractually bound to pay a creator millions of dollars in royalties for every merchandise sold, can they actually claim any degree?
Legally, no.
Right. The consumer might be able to compartmentalize the art in their imagination, but the corporation is legally and materially binding themselves to the artist with every single transaction. Cox's defense sounds nice on a podcast, but isn't it just empty corporate rhetoric designed to run out the clock?
I mean, from a philosophical standpoint, yes, it is highly contradictory. If your financial apparatus directly enriches the artist, you are in a functional partnership with them, not separated.
Right.
However, from the perspective of corporate survival, Cox doesn't need his argument to pass a rigorous ethical philosophy exam.
Well, he doesn't care about the philosophy.
Not at all. He just needs it to function as armor in the immediate media cycle.
Yeah.
He is providing a palatable, socially acceptable soundbite so that the institutional shareholders feel secure and the massive base of casual consumers don't feel guilty when they pick up the toy in the aisle.
He just needs the logic to hold water long enough for the credit card transaction to clear.
Exactly.
And the wild thing is, it seems to be working, which brings us to the stark, somewhat brutal financial realities of the situation. Let's look at what the source describes as the triumph of the bottom line over online act.
Yeah, this is where the numbers get really interesting.
Because despite the massive volume of the backlash, despite the trending hashtags and the highly organized calls for boycotts, the source points out a very inconvenient truth for the people trying to stop.
The market signal was completely inverted from the social media signal.
Completely inverted.
Yeah. When Hasbro announced this master toy deal, their stock didn't plummet. It didn't even hold steady. It went up significantly.
Wow.
The hosts of Clownfish TV actually note, with a certain degree of irony, that they personally benefited from from this because they hold Hasbro stock.
So Wall Street looked at the raging culture war, looked at the IP acquisition, and voted with billions of dollars in capital that this was a highly intelligent, highly profitable.
Yep.
How does the source explain this massive disconnect? If the internet is screaming that this is a toxic, brand-destroying partnership, why are the investors popping champagne?
Well, the analysis provided by Clownfish TV breaks this down by establishing a hard statistical difference between two distinct demographic groups, the core audience and the vocal fringe.
Okay, break that down for me.
Their argument is that the activists who are loudly organizing and threatening boycotts on platforms like Twitter or Bluesky are fundamentally not the actual consumers of these physical products.
They are generating a massive amount of text, but they aren't the ones actually standing at the cash register at Target with $50 worth of interactive plush toys.
Exact. The economic reality is that these boycotters possess virtually zero financial leverage over Hasbro. Statistically speaking, they were never going to purchase the Magic, the Gathering crossover sets, or the premium action figures in the first place.
That makes
So therefore, their outrage, while culturally very loud, is economically performative. It does not threaten the actual revenue.
So what does this all mean? When you frame it like that, it reminds me of someone leaving a furious, multi-paragraph, one-star Yelp review for a highly exclusive, expensive steakhouse.
Okay, I like this.
But the catch is, the reviewer was banned from the restaurant years ago, and they happen to be a strict vegan anyway.
Right.
Yes, the review makes a lot of noise. It might temporarily drag down the aggregate star rating on the website, but it doesn't do a single thing to empty the cash register. The people actually sitting inside the restaurant are still going to order the ribeye.
That analogy perfectly illustrates the concept of fiduciary duty in this context.
How so?
A publicly traded corporation like Hasbro has a legal obligation to maximize returns for its shareholders. They cannot operate based on social media sentiment. They must operate on hard market signals. And the source argues that corporations haven't just stumbled into this realization. They have actively tested these waters over the last decade.
Yeah, the source material brings up a few very specific examples of Hasbro's past attempts to cater to more progressive activist sentiment and the results of those experiments.
We did.
They mentioned the attempt to rebrand the Potato People when the company tried to degender the Mr. Potato Head brand to align with modern conversations about inclusivity. They also point to the creation of a non-binary character within the Transformers franchise.
And according to the commentators, those initiatives were financial failures.
Really?
Yeah, they generated a brief flurry of positive press from certain outlets, but they did not translate into increased sales at the retail level.
Wow.
In some instances, the source note, these changes were quietly rolled back or they were aggressively altered for overseas markets, where those specific cultural conversations simply do not resonate or are actively rejected.
So the thesis here is that major companies spent the better part of a decade trying the activism thing. They genuinely hoped that by catering to these highly vocal online communities, they would unlock massive new demographics and drive unprecedented sales.
But the cash register remained quiet.
Right.
The core argument of the source is that we are currently witnessing a massive, industry-wide, unapologetic, hard pivot back to guaranteed legacy moneymakers.
The safe bets.
Exactly. Corporations are returning to the core audience who simply wants the toys, the competitive gameplay, and the nostalgia, completely divorced from any accompanying cultural homework.
But the source material pushes this even further. They claim that these boycotts targeting Harry Potter don't just fail to damage the bottom line, they actually serve to inflate it.
Yeah, this is a fascinating angle.
The outrage isn't just harmless, it is actively profitable. Let's look at how the Clownfish TV commentators break down the unintended consequences of online boycotts and what they identify as a massive hypocrisy in how cancel culture operates.
They are essentially describing a textbook, massively scaled version of the Streisand effect.
Here's where it gets really interesting. It's the ultimate paradox of modern outrage. You try to suffocate something, and in doing so, you give it all the oxygen it needs to explode.
Exactly.
The source applies this directly to the timeline of the Wizarding World franchise. They point out that before this controversy at zenith, the Harry Potter IP was actually showing genuine signs of market.
It was definitely slowing down.
Yeah. The Fantastic Beasts cinematic spin-offs were yielding diminishing box office and increasingly poor critical reception. The general cultural footprint of the brand felt like like it was finally shrink.
The trajectory was absolutely pointing downward, but then the controversy erupted in full force, perfectly coinciding with the marketing and release of the video game Hogwarts Legacy.
Oh, right. That was huge.
The calls for boycotts were unprecedented. There were organized campaigns to publicly shame and harass anyone who dared to stream the game on platforms like Twitch.
And the result. Hogwarts Legacy sold roughly 20 million copies. It became the best-selling game of the entire year, steamrolling the competition.
Which is wild when you think.
It is. The source firmly asserts that the activists, by relentlessly keeping the brand at the absolute top of the global news cycle day after day, inadvertently renewed mainstream interest in the IP. They provided hundreds of millions of dollars in free, aggressive global marketing.
Consider the mechanics of the modern attention economy. In a heavily fragmented media landscape, simply making a consumer aware that your product exists is the most expensive and difficult part of advertising.
So,
controversy is an incredibly potent, virtually free tool for generating visibility. The source argues that the activists, in their zeal to destroy the brand, actually made J.K. Rowling significantly wealthy.
So, if I am a cynical corporate marketing executive sitting in a boardroom today, am I quietly hoping for a boycott every time I launch a...
I mean, you might be.
It seems like outrage is the most reliable growth metric available. But the source material goes much deeper than just the marketing. They highlight a very dark structural hypocrisy in how these online mobs choose.
Yeah, this raises an important question about leverage. The commentators point out that the machinery of online cancellation is incredibly selective and, frankly, quite cowardly in its application.
Cowardly? How do they frame that?
They illustrate how these mobs will successfully dogpile, harass, and ultimately destroy the livelihoods of individuals at smaller companies while completely ignoring the actual power structures.
Yeah, the source gives two devastating examples of this. They mention a lead developer who worked on Hogwarts Legacy. Activists apparently dug through his old YouTube viewing history, generated a massive outrage cycle, and he was reportedly pushed out or fired from his position. And they also detail the story of a woman named Carol Lynn who worked at a smaller boutique gaming company called Limited Run. According to the source, she was fired simply because she tweeted that she was excited to play the new Harry Potter.
So the mechanism of action here is entirely focused on punching down. They target mid-level employees, independent contractors, or mom-and-pop operators.
But as the source aggressively points out, these exact same activists completely, utterly ignore the massive, uncancelable corporate conglomerates that are the actual load-bearing pillars of the Harry Potter financial empire.
They won't touch them.
Right. The source lists them off. Walmart, Target, the Lego Corporation, Universal theme parks, and even massive ubiquitous food brands like Oreos or Goldfish that regularly do promotional tie-ins with the IP.
This disparity reveals everything you need to know about the mechanics of leverage. Outrage scales incredibly poorly against institutional apathy.
When you say institutional apathy, you mean Walmart is just structurally too massive to care about?
Yes, exactly.
1,000 angry tweets demanding someone be fired. Catastrophic existential crisis for an indie game studio. But it doesn't even register as a statistical anomaly for a big box global retailer.
Exactly that.
Yeah.
If a mob targets a small studio, the studio ownership panic. They feel the immediate social pressure, they worry about their short-term cash flow, they feel personal guilt, and they almost always react, usually by terminating the targeted employee to appease the mob and make the noise stop.
Just to make it go away.
Yeah, and then the activists get a hit of dopamine. They feel powerful because they successfully exerted control over another human being's life.
But when those same 5,000 people try to target Walmart, nothing happens. Walmart doesn't panic. Walmart doesn't even issue a generic PR statement.
Why would they?
Right. They possess the institutional mass to simply ignore the noise until it dissipates. And because the mob receives no reaction, no dopamine hit of perceived power, they quickly lose interest and move on to a softer target.
The source is highlighting this dynamic to prove that these specific boycotts are largely performative. If the goal was truly to dismantle the financial apparatus of the Harry Potter brand, it would require boycotting every single grocery store, toy aisle, and theme park in the country.
Which they aren't going to do.
No. Instead, the strategy is to find vulnerable, soft targets to bully in order to signal virtue and ideological purity to their own in-group.
It is a brutal, cynical assessment, but it perfectly aligns with the observable reality of who actually loses their job versus who continues to make a dollar. And this brings us to an incredibly fascinating and honestly somewhat dystopian pivot in our final section.
This is where it gets a little scary.
Yeah. Because as massive corporations realize they possess the institutional mass to just ignore the mob and continue profiting, they are also discovering new technological methods to bypass human friction entirely. Let's look at how this source connects the Harry Potter deal to broader shifts in technology, specifically the rise of artificial intelligence.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the Hasbro deal isn't an isolated anomaly. It is a highly visible symptom of a much larger tectonic shift currently occurring in how media is produced, how fandoms are managed, and how corporations are aggressively mitigating human risk.
The connective tissue running through all of this is artificial intelligence. The source notes that Hasbro CEO Chris Cox hasn't just been talking about Harry Potter. He has previously discussed the integration of AI tools for Wizards of the Coast products.
Right.
He has specifically mentioned exploring its use in generating tabletop game modules and the accompanying artwork.
Now, tie that back to the internal friction we discussed earlier.
The WOTC employees.
Yeah. There were widespread rumors that Wizards of the Coast employees were protesting and threatening to refuse work on the Harry Potter IP. The Clownfish TV commentators extrapolate a very chilling, yet highly logical, corporate response to that kind of internal rebellion in the age of AI.
They suggest that if human employees refuse to work on a legally mandated, highly profitable project, the corporation is no longer going to negotiate with them or attempt to placate their moral concerns.
Not at all.
They're simply going to fire them and replace them with an algorithm.
The source bluntly states that a company like Hasbro could easily utilize AI to generate Harry Potter magic cards. If they hold the legal master rights to the intellectual property, the AI can instantaneously generate the artwork, synthesize the game mechanics, and format the cards for printing.
And the AI does all of that without any moral objections.
Zero.
It doesn't demand a diversity and inclusion consultation. It doesn't tweet its grievances, and it doesn't threaten to leak internal corporate memos to the gaming press.
It acts as the ultimate impenetrable corporate shield. AI cannot unionize, it possesses no political ideology, and remains completely indifferent to the social media presence of the original author. Its sole function is frictionless production.
It fundamentally changes the nature of the technology. It's not just being used as a tool for generating art or writing. It is being deployed as a digital strikebreaker.
That's a great way to phrase it.
It is a mechanism to completely sever and bypass the messy, emotional, deeply human element of the creative process whenever that human element becomes too difficult or too expensive for management to control. That is a terrifying reality for anyone currently earning a living in the creative industry.
And this newly discovered corporate ruth, this absolute prioritization of frictionless profit, is also being mirrored in the very platforms these communities use to organize.
The social media.
Yes. The source points out that the social media platform Bluesky, which they characterize as a primary hub for these highly vocal activists, is currently showing significant signs of contraction and internal restructuring.
Yeah, they highlight a specific leader. They claim the former CEO of Bluesky, Jay Graber, was ousted shortly after International Women's Day and was replaced by, as the commentators bluntly put it, a white dude.
The underlying implication there is profound. It suggests that the era of zero interest rate, ideology-driven tech management is rapidly coming to an end.
The money isn't free anymore.
Exactly. Even the platforms that were explicitly built to foster and house these progressive activist communities are hitting a brutal financial wall. They're being forced to pivot back to traditional, pragmatic, and perhaps much more ruthless management structures simply to survive in a tightening economy.
It is the death of the ideological vanity project. The money is drying up, so the spreadsheets are taking over again, and the source brilliantly illustrates how this shift is manifesting not just in boardrooms, but inside the granular demographics of the fandoms themselves.
Oh, the Transformers thing.
Yeah. They detail a literal civil war currently raging within the Transformers fandom.
This is a perfect microcosm of the broader conflict. They describe a fundamental clash between two wildly different consumer bases. On one side, you have the traditional fans of the Boycott toy line. Yeah, it's a term for the consumers who simply want to purchase physical plastic figures of cars and jets that transform into robots and engage in kinetic, action-oriented battle.
The people who actually buy this.
Right. And on the other side, you have a newer segment of the fandom that the source refers to as the shippers.
Okay, what's a shipper in this context?
These are fans who primarily migrated into the fandom via comic books or fan fiction platforms. Their engagement is heavily focused on romantic or interpersonal pairings between the robot characters, often projecting diverse sexualities or modern gender identities onto the IP.
Okay, so how did Hasbro handle that?
Well, the source analyzes how Hasbro navigated this. For a period of time, Hasbro heavily indulged this newer, highly vocal shipper demographic, primarily within the narratives of the IDW comic books.
Which probably played well online.
It did. It generated a lot of positive online chatter and aligned with the ideological pushes of the last decade.
But The source delivers the punchline. The actual physical toy line, the plastic cars and jets that generate the real revenue, began failing. The comic books might have been trending on social media, but the core demographic stopped buying the physical products.
If you synthesize all these seemingly disparate threads presented by the source, the uncompromising Harry Potter licensing deal, the looming threat of AI generation, the pragmatic contraction of platforms like Bluesky, and the civil war within the Transformers fandom, they all point toward a singular, massive corporate course correction.
Whether it involves ignoring the shippers to violently refocus on the core demographic that actually purchased plastic trucks,
or tech platforms abandoning idealistic leadership models for sheer survival,
or utilizing AI algorithms to completely bypass employee moral protest, massive multinational corporations are aggressively and unapologetic prioritizing frictionless profit over social.
The era of corporate coddling has effectively concluded. The spreadsheets have won the war.
Yeah, they have.
The market has delivered its final verdict, and it is clearly communicated to the executives that while online outrage is incredibly loud, institutional apathy paired with legacy nostalgia is astronomically more profitable.
Wow. Okay, let's take a breath and synthesize the massive amount of ground.
We covered a lot.
We really did. We started by looking at a simple toy license, and we ended up dissecting higher underlying machinery of the modern corporate world. We've explored how Hasbro's embrace of the highly controversial Harry Potter IP exposes the absolute mathematical limit consumer boycotts mass.
We examined the stark financial power of the silent purchasing core audience versus the incredibly loud but financially disconnected online fringe. We saw how corporate fiduciaries will invariably follow the revenue stream regardless of the cultural turbulence.
We analyze the unintended consequences of the stray effect, where attempting to suffocate or cancel a brand can actually provide it with the greatest, most lucrative marketing campaign it could possibly.
Truly ironic.
And finally, we looked at the looming, sterile shadow of artificial intelligence and how it is being positioned as the ultimate corporate tool to eliminate creative friction, bypass employee pushback, and ensure uninterrupted production.
It represents a profound, permanent shift in the fundamental ways that culture is manufactured, managed, and ultimately sold back to us.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to turn this directly back to you, the listener. How do you navigate this incredibly messy, highly compromised land? When you go to the store and you purchase a new video game, or you buy a movie, or you pick up a piece of plastic nostalgia from your childhood, are you actively doing the complex mental gymnastics required to separate the art from the artist?
It's exhausting just thinking about it.
It is. Or are you, like millions of others, simply looking for a fleeting moment of joy, a little bit of harmless escapism, completely regardless of the deafening noise of the culture war that surrounds?
It forces every individual to confront their own personal ethics of consumption in a world where it feels like every single dollar you spend is being tracked as a political endorsement.
But I want to leave you with one final brand new thought to mull over. A concept that takes everything we've analyzed today and pushes it just one step further into our immediate.
Let's hear the extrapolation.
If we accept the premise offered by the Hasbro seat, if we accept that in order to enjoy modern pop culture, we must actively separate the art from the artist, what happens in the very near future when artificial intelligence completely severs that link forever? Imagine a world 5 or 10 years from now where an AI generates the next multi-billion-dollar, globally dominant fantasy franchise from scratch.
A completely synthetic, algorithmically perfect equivalent to Harry Potter or Star Wars.
Precise. In that world, there will be no problematic human creator to boycott. There will be no controversial social media history to dig up and debate. There is no artist to separate from the art because there is no artist.
Just code.
Right. The corporate spreadsheet will finally be perfectly, flawlessly clean. But here's the question you have to ask yourself. Without a human, creator flawed, messy, controversial, deeply human or otherwise will, that perfectly sanitized, algorithmically generated, frictionless art ever be capable of bringing the genuine, enduring, resonant joy that made something like Harry Potter a global phenomenon in the first place?
It is the ultimate question for the future of media. Can you manufacture a soul from a spreadsheet?
I don't know the answer, but when the diagnostic X-ray of our pop culture finally shows a perfectly clean, unbroken, synthetic white line, will we even want to look at it anymore? Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We always love putting on the hard hats and wading into the mechanics of these muddy waters. Keep questioning the noise, keep looking at the math behind the spreadsheet.